bumping into each other on things. And
Yeah,
stuff, so.
yeah, running in the same circles.
These people flew down here, so.
Emily, you related to Eric?
Eric's my dad.
Yeah, it's okay. Cool. So I worked at Oak Point with Hillary.
Oh, okay. My sister. Oh, awesome.
So and then I worked with your dad on a couple projects.
Rebecca's
He
parking
actually
her
did.
car.
He actually
Perfect, and
the
hopefully
building
George
show.
will make it
He
too.
didn't he do the plumbing on the building we're about to show?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's
Yeah.
like
We're waiting for one of our panelists to park. I'm sure you all have empathy for that.
I lived in Utah and Colorado and Michigan and traveled.
Yes.
I remember him mentioning something about it one time and stuff like that. So.
Do a lot of different places.
Here comes Rebecca.
This is just my notes. I don't actually have the
Oh, okay.
Show or just
Well, I'm happy to take photos if that helps.
so you can talk a little bit of Hampshire housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. You can get extra time. So Rebecca, I had you there, yeah.
I know. Well, we all. Nice to see you guys. Yeah, I just got a call from Big Taylor the other day. So, what you're working on, so we're trying.
So good morning and welcome to Call It Home, our forum on workforce housing in the Seacoast area. My name is Robin Schnell and I'm a member of South Church's Social Justice Associates. And we're going to start our forum today with some opening words from our minister, Reverend Susan Sahusky Brown.
Thank you, Robin. On behalf of the members of South Church, it's my pleasure to welcome you here to this forum. We are gathered together because we believe that affordable housing makes a vibrant community. We know that providing workforce affordable housing is one of the needs in the Seacoast area, and we know it's a complex issue. And we believe that people united together to be engaged in open, loving, and curious dialogue can handle discussions that will embrace all the complexity. So in the name of all that is good and gracious, I invite us to begin this discussion understanding the place we call home is a sacred space. It is a space to renew the spirit, to feed the body, to entertain friends, to hold the laughter of loved ones. If we have the power to effect a change in policy and possibility, and we couple it with imagination and willpower, then we can assure that everyone is provided opportunity to build a place called home without the intense financial burden that is all too often facing many right now. So let us be creative, curious, and challenged by those who will now share their perspectives. Bless you and your families, this community, your loved ones. May it be so. Robin?
Okay, so first, I want to start out by asking some rhetorical questions. So think about how many people how many workers you come in contact with on a daily or weekly basis. Maybe the person who checks you out at the grocery store or your mail carrier, maybe once a week the person who picks up your garbage. Those are people you see. Then think about how many other workers you don't see but you need them every day. So the people who keep the lights on, the people who keep the water clean and running, maybe your kids' or grandkids' teachers. And then think also about the people that you don't see, but you want them to be there. So maybe the ambulance driver, maybe the home health care aide. All those people live, we want them to be living in our community. I have to, I'm one of those people. We want them to be living and feel at home in our community. So when you're thinking about home, I want you to think not just about the roof over their heads, but think about the fact that they have to be able to get food, they have to have child care, they have to be able to get to health care, and a way to get there. Maybe they don't have a car. How are they going to do that? So when you're thinking workforce housing, don't think small, think bigger than that. So today, our hope, when you leave here, we hope you come away with a greater understanding of the problems and the solutions that are in the works for workforce housing, and about the fact that each one of us is just one person with a voice. We're all capable and have a role in making this a better home for everyone. Okay, so in a church, we pass a basket. You're used to that, right? So today we're going to pass a basket, but we don't want your money. We want you to be advocates. So Janet's going to pass out some postcards that have stamps on them. You don't have to find the post office. And some of them have illustrations on them, and she also has, and Marty too is passing them out. We also have some crayons and pencils if you want to make your own picture on them.
So the kids this morning made pictures, and we are encouraging you to either take one with a picture on it, or with a wreath, or take a plain one and take some markers.
So this morning our panelists are Emily Flinkstrom, who's the Executive Director of Fair Tide in Kittery, Maggie and John Randolph of Harmony Homes, Rebecca Perkins-Quokka of the New Hampshire Senate 21st District, and Andrew Bagley, who is a member of Portsmouth City Council. And they're going to be telling us what their organization or company does, including, they're going to talk about projects that they're excited about. Let's see. And what the solutions to problems are, what roadblocks they've encountered, and what successes they've had, and any future projects. And they're also going to tell you if there's a particular person that they want you to contact. They may not be able to tell you the exact person, if it's your state assembly person or your state senator, because we have people from at least 2 states here and listening tonight, or today. But how best you can communicate your ideas and information. So let's start with Emily Flinkstrom.
Thank you very much, and thank you for including me in this really important discussion, and what wonderful opening remarks. My name's Emily. I'm the director of Fair Tide. We are located in Kittery, Maine. We provide housing and supportive services for individuals and families experiencing homelessness here on the seacoast. We were founded about 24 years ago by a group of folks who just realized that there was an issue with homelessness in their community, and they decided to do something about it. So they raised a bunch of money, and they purchased and renovated a house in Kittery. And they turned it into what at that time was run as a 2-year transitional housing program. So folks, individuals and families would move into the house, work closely with our case manager, and then after 2 years, we'd help them transition into more permanent housing. About 5 years ago, we took a really hard look at what the needs are in our community and what the gaps are, and put a lot of thought into how we can help fill those gaps. And one thing that came out of that was a change in our model. So rather than having a 2-year program, we moved to permanent housing. And we did that for a variety of different reasons, but primarily because we really want to provide people with the permanency and the stability that they need to get jobs, to get their kids into a school system where they can stay, to really be successful. And so for that reason, our model is now to provide permanent housing, and really all that means is it's a very similar program. Folks that live in our house still work really closely with our case manager. They sign a year lease. If everything's going well, they can sign on again. The other thing we realize is that we need to grow. There is a huge demand for, as you all know, affordable housing and the supportive services that we provide. And so we created a really thoughtful and intentional growth plan 5 years ago that we've been following. And we're doing that through a couple different avenues. One is working closely with landlords. So we're working to partner with landlords and encourage them to rent to the folks that we work with who oftentimes have a rental voucher. And I just want to say a little bit about vouchers for a minute for those of you that are unaware of what those resources are. That's really the primary way that people who are on the very bottom of the economic spectrum can afford rent. And the way a voucher works is the household pays 30% of their income toward the rental costs, and the voucher covers the remainder up to a maximum amount that's set by the government. So what is happening these days is that there actually, at least in Maine, are quite a few vouchers that are available, especially to people who are experiencing homelessness. But once a household gets that voucher in hand, it's really hard to find a place to use it. Not just because there are very few units available in general, but there's lots of stigma attached to folks who have vouchers. It can be a complicated process and intimidating for landlords who have never worked with people who have vouchers before. So we launched a program in late 2019 that provides incentives to landlords to work with us. We provide a $500 sign-on bonus. We provide access to a risk mitigation fund for any damages that might occur that are above and beyond a security deposit. We also offer to pay to hold a unit vacant while we find somebody who's the right fit for that unit and process the paperwork and so forth. And then we also provide support from myself and our case manager for the tenant and for the landlord. So we help them through the whole process, through the whole tenancy. They've got 2 cell phone numbers to call should anything go wrong. But the intention is our case manager works very closely with all of our clients that we help secure housing for and can nip any problems in the bud. So that's been a fairly successful program. And there is actually a very similar program run here in this area of New Hampshire through a coalition that I'm also part of called Home for All. Their program's called the Affordable Housing Incentive Program. If anybody is interested, I'm happy to provide more information, but it's kind of modeled off Fairtide's program, and they provide a lot of the same incentives, but it's just mostly focused on New Hampshire units, where ours is mostly focused in Maine. The other avenue that we have been working to grow through is to help bring new units of affordable housing to the area. And so for the last 4 years or so, we've really been laying the groundwork for that and focusing mostly in Kittery. So part of the Kittery Housing Committee, and our work has resulted in some zoning changes in town to allow for housing in places where housing wasn't allowed before, provides incentives, and in some cases mandates through inclusionary zoning, where if there's a development that's 5 units or more, 10% of that has to be affordable to people making 80% of the area median income or less. So we're working to try to get those changes expanded to other zones in town as well. The other piece that the Kittery Town Council adopted was the creation of a housing reserve fund. So that's really a pot of money that can be used in creative ways to further affordable housing goals. So we actually are about to launch a pilot program that provides grants to qualifying homeowners to build accessory dwelling units. The homeowner has to qualify at 80% the median income or less, and then the people that will be renting the accessory dwelling units also have to qualify. So it's kind of a double whammy benefit. So we're really excited to see how that takes off, and hopefully we can continue to expand that program as more funds get put into the Housing Reserve Fund. The town also voted to have taxed foreclosed properties that come into the hands of the town be used for affordable housing. So we can look at those properties and see if they make sense to actually be turned into affordable housing units, or the sale of those properties, the proceeds can be put into the Housing Reserve Fund to be used for the program I was talking about, or any future programs the Housing Committee comes up with. We are very excited that after 4 years of laying the groundwork, we actually Fairtide has a site under contract to build a small, affordable, supportive housing project. We also are teed up to reply to a request for proposals that the Kittery Town Council should be putting out soon for one of those tax foreclosed properties. So I feel like, excuse me, we've been doing this work with no outcome for 4 years, and now we're finally at the tipping point. And so it's very exciting to see some of this coming together. That property that we have under contract, we're also going to be building a resource hub of social services. So we're going to bring together agencies that help people in need to give them one place to go, instead of having to be bounced around and navigating this kind of fragmented and broken system. So we have a lot of really exciting projects coming down the pike and are super busy in a good way. I was asked to talk about what I wish I had to do the work better. And I look at the word realistically that you had in there, but I'm just gonna say these anyway. I wish we had more landlord partners. There is no shortage of people to go into the units. Again, in Maine, there's really no shortage of vouchers at this point for the folks we work with, so we really, really just need more landlord partners to work with us. I would like to have 3 more of me. I'm the only full-time staff member at Fairtide. We have a case manager that works really closely with our clients, but we could really use some more staffing capacity, and we're working on that. But I feel like we're, like I said, kind of at that tipping point of growth, and are trying to figure out how to, where to add some staffing help. And then finally, of course, funds, and specifically unrestricted and ongoing funding. And I know that's maybe the fairly unrealistic part, but I spend a lot of time writing grants and doing fundraising events, and I think that's very important work. And if we had some of that ongoing funding to cover operational costs, it would free up my time to do a lot more of that, the growth work that we've been working on. So in terms of who to reach out to, I think what I have learned is how important it is to be involved in your specific community and to say yes to these changes that are going to further affordable housing, to say yes to projects that are going to further affordable housing. You oftentimes will have a lot more people come out to say no, and they can have very loud voices, so we need more people just in general saying yes to these things.
I'm John Randolph, and this is Maggie Randolph. We kind of come as a team, so we'll probably pass the mic back and forth a couple times. We own Harmony Homes in assisted living in Durham. We have about 90 employees, and we're sitting here today because about 3 or 4 years ago, we were kind of facing what most businesses in the area were facing. We just couldn't get employees to come to work. We were in an employee shortage, and so we decided to sit down with our staff and ask them what their challenges are. And we kind of kept hearing the same story over and over again. One, we were hearing stories like they live in Farmington, New Hampshire, and drive over to South Berwick, Maine to drop their kids off with their parents. And they drive to Durham, and then they do that the opposite end of the day all the way back. And that's not much of a quality of life, to be honest with you. It's tough on the children, it's tough on the caregiver that's taking care of our parents or our grandparents. And so Maggie and I set out to do the best we could with benefits. Initially, we thought that we would just pay more, and you can only do that for so long before you can't make the housing available or affordable to the seniors that live there. So we decided to get a little creative, and we went to the town of Durham, and we asked the town of Durham, can you bring that picture up? Sorry. Asked the town of Durham permission to build on our location, this building that's gonna pop up any second now. Yeah, just to fill in the time why the picture's coming up, Emily's father actually designed, there you go, got it? Emily's father actually did the plumbing and heating design on this building. So, we didn't know it until today. Well, we knew it was your dad, but we didn't know each other until today. So,
You might need to click on the PowerPoint icon to launch it again.
there you go. Now just hit that little guy right there. Thank you. Great. And this is pretty much where I start to turn it over to Maggie because it's a lot of design and everything. But we asked the town of Durham to give us permission to build this on land that we already owned. And it has 7 one-bedroom apartments for our staff and a childcare, and we'll talk about childcare a little bit more in depth in a minute. But we lease them to our employees for 30% of their pay, or if they're a student, they can work 16 hours and get a free apartment. And it became very popular. All 7 apartments were filled before we opened our doors, and we have a 7 or 8 person waiting list for the building. We thought we were going to solve our problems with this building, but it kind of drove us to do some other things. But I'm going to kind of turn it over to Maggie to talk about this particular building and where we're going from here.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience with the technology. As much as I work in the modeling world with computers and everything, it doesn't always make me adept at it. But so here's Harmony Place. This is, as John said, a building with 7 one-bedroom apartments, a child care and office space for our staff that we built on the campus of Harmony Homes. And you can see the assisted living in the background. So not a far commute there for a walk. But we're really excited about this, and it was important to us to, again, offer. John and I talk a lot about dignity in your living space, and we talk, Robin, you mentioned the concept of home and how important that is to us. And so quality of life and dignity, not only to our seniors, but to our staff across the board, whatever we can do. So this is the building that we built. This is just one of the first floor plan. You can see they're very simple units. These units are just under 500 square feet, about 20 feet wide or so, and they're, 1 bedroom. They've got laundry in the unit, stand-up showers, a kitchen, living room. This is the view from from the 3rd floor, so it's waterfront living, and we're very proud of that, and our staff gets, complaints about sun blinding, so it's hard. And you can, again, you see the campus that we're on, right on the Oyster River. And then these are pictures from inside the unit, so they're simple, but we're very proud of the quality of them. Upcoming, though, we
kind of go back and forth. The other nice thing about this is the childcare that we're working on opening. Jen, can you raise your hand and wave to everybody? Jen's from A Place to Grow in Brentwood, and she is working with us to set up our childcare in this building. So some of our staff will be able to walk right downstairs, drop their children off, and then walk to work. And so we can give them affordable housing. But the other piece that Maggie didn't bring up with this building was we put it out to bid, and we couldn't afford to build it. We couldn't make affordable housing out of it if we went out to contractors. So we went out and hired a crew and bought an excavator and built it. When she said we built it ourselves, we literally, 5 of us built this building, and we saved about $400,000 from our lowest contract bid, and that allowed this to stay at the price that it is. And so we have people living in here for $650 for these 1 bedrooms, and our highest is like $850, $900. And that's the $900, they have another working individual in the apartment. So they're 2 people apartments typically. We do allow pets, which are super popular and everything, but we do give them a hard time if they're late to work because there's no traffic at all, no traffic. and everything. But like we said, the demand for this was so high that we decided to jump into this and go full blast. So I'm going to turn this back over to Maggie to talk about this project.
So enter in the cottages at Back River Road in Dover. We worked very hard with the city of Dover for this project. These are tiny homes. And by tiny homes, I want to differentiate, though we call them cottages, because a tiny home, if anybody who's ever watched HGTV and sees the trailers running around, which are really cool, these are on slabs, so they're not moving ever. So that's an important differentiation. But we're very excited about these because, again, when we talk about dignity and quality of life, we talk about community and just really feeling proud of the place that we live in, also to fit in with the neighborhoods in which they are, because I think that's scary when you think about who's going to be living next to me. Well, again, as Robin pointed out, these are, the people that, that serve coffee, that work in the assisted livings, that, your firefighters and teachers. And that's a really important point with this that I want to, bring up. We talk about the area median income that Emily already mentioned. In Dover, so when we talk about workforce housing, it's 60% of the area median income. And affordable housing is 30% of your income. So they go hand in hand. So when we're talking about that, in Dover, you're making $44,000 a year. And then you take 30% of that, that's who who can afford to live here. So we are proposing 44 cottages that we agreed to rent out to under HUD levels. So that's $1,000 or less. These are all one-bedroom units in here. And the design is really, we're excited about it. They all face a common green. So you park along this middle street that goes through the complex, and then you'll walk to your unit. And so these have actually been really successful pocket neighborhoods elsewhere in the country. Out west, it's a typology that's older than the suburbs that we're used to, that came around in the 40s. But we'd like to just resurrect them here as well. And so again, they're very safe. You know your neighbors. Porches are very important because you see who's coming and going. And it's about community. So we've broken ground, and I want to bring up some other images that we walked, that we've presented as we went through the planning board process here. But again, these are, little clusters of these.
We'd like to highlight that Dover was very accommodating to the project. This was originally 12 housing lots, and we went in and talked to the town planner, and because we were willing to keep it below HUD, they were willing to increase density a little bit. The other thing that we would like to highlight on these is we sat down with a lot of our 18 to 25-year-old staff and said, what would it take to keep you in New Hampshire? And everything, because we're losing our 18 to 25-year-old crowd. I see a lot of head nodding. I've got 2 that went to college down south, and I'm trying to drag them back up. But they're living at their parents' house. So moving in 384 square feet, they got to go furniture shopping to move into 384 square feet, where most of us think that that's tiny. It's and everything else. Or they're living in a college dorm with somebody in 200 square feet, and this is a lot of space. These have lofts in them, and the state of New Hampshire lofts are now legal bedrooms, so you could have a child upstairs and a couple downstairs. You got to use your space very wisely. Once again, we grew our crew to do this side, so we're up to 8 that are going to be building these, and we can reduce the cost of them by about 30% by building them in-house. So we do it for no profit. Maggie takes about a 1% architectural fee, which is about 6 or 7% below what an architect would typically take. And we don't charge a GC fee. We just turn the direct cost of the units into the bank, and the bank funds them. We've been very supported by Newburyport Bank so far, but there's a lot of banks that are interested in getting involved in this. And so as we kind of get ready to hand this on, a couple things that we need to kind of open up. The state of New Hampshire really needs to open its eyes to the policies that they have set. They have limiting in childcare, and if you want to talk to Jen afterwards, she can highlight the challenges of daycare in the state of New Hampshire. You can't pay $400 a week and make $16 an hour and work. It doesn't add up. It doesn't work. You can't pay $1,800 a month for a 1-bedroom and make $16 an hour and live in the seacoast. It just doesn't work. And so Maggie and I are working with a couple and a couple other towns of potentially beyond our 44 units. We'd like to continue to do this. We really enjoy it and everything else. And so that's kind of our projects and our recommendations.
And one thing that I want to talk too about moving forward with other projects, I mean, we'd love to even, talk about opportunities passed over. And we're looking at a 2-year build out for this project. But one thing that the state is, some towns and cities are really great at it, and some cities are catching up, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk about, more programs and incentives coming down, but to really look at how we're addressing density. I think the idea of density scares us, not only the idea of like who's going to be living right next to me, but also, are we all going to be living on top of each other? I think there's so much that we can do that's contextual for our neighborhoods, the ADUs that, we can fit in and tuck in. What if it looks more like a carriage house? And I think that's more palatable to some of us. But also, we have, density requirements across the state that are requiring 2 acres per, for 1 unit. And when you think about it, that's incredibly unsustainable for our state. If we want to preserve other areas of our state to remain green and remain, as they are, then we need to build denser where we can. And so let's be smart about that. So I'm going to turn it over at that point and see what we can do in the state.
Great. Thank you, guys, and thanks for being here today. This is kind of a joy to be here with these folks who are in the trenches on this work. And I met Emily, I think, at a panel maybe right when you were doing your 5-year plan like 4 years ago. And then I met John and Maggie, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I've said to them something that I still feel very strongly about, which is that by the time we are asking our nonprofit service providers and our partners in senior living to build their own housing, we in government have missed an opportunity to support them. So I think that I love to hear these stories of jumping in and making something happen, but I also think it just highlights how at the local level and at the state level, we need to be doing more to support our employers, our economy, and all the members of our community on housing. So it's a bittersweet message, I think, in some ways, but it highlights the urgency that we are actually seeing creative solutions like this come up, because I think that with support from our state and local governments, the market would be doing more of this too. So it kind of highlights why Andrew and I are here. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm from New Hampshire originally, from Stratham, and I served on Portsmouth City Council for 4 years. And I ran on the singular issue of affordable and workforce housing back in 2015. Before that, I was a commissioner at the Portsmouth Housing Authority. I was on the board of the Workforce Housing Coalition with Tom Emerson, who I see in the audience. And I wrote my master's thesis on zoning ordinances and how we could change them to support affordable housing. So I've been working on this issue for 12 or 13 years at this point. And now I'm in the state Senate representing Portsmouth, Durham, Newmarket, Madbury, Lee, Newfields, and Newington. I don't want to leave anybody out, they'll be upset. And one of the things that I've brought to the Senate is this housing background and being able to make sure that our legislators are understanding the urgency of what it is like to live in our generation, and also what are these solutions that are coming out of not only our local communities, but state and national best practices, and how can we bring those to New Hampshire? And so one of the pieces of legislation that's sort of the flagship piece of legislation we've been working really hard on as a very broad housing coalition up at the state level is SB 400. And it is, at this point, it's like a 12 or 13-page bill, and it's got a whole bunch of different stuff in there that are different policy solutions. And so it was drafted by a set of housing experts, 2 or 3 years ago, and this is its 3rd time through the legislature. And so it needs your support. One of the actions you can take is to call your representatives at the state level. If you're from New Hampshire, I know we have some Maine folks here. Call Representative Tom Dolan, who's chairman of the Municipal and County Government Committee up at the state level, and tell him we need SB 400. In the bill are, just as a couple of the pieces, one is a housing champions program. And so essentially what that would do is try to create incentives for our municipalities to adopt housing-friendly policies. So zoning is piece number one, and I can talk a little bit about that in detail, but there are other things we can do to support housing. We can look around our municipality and think to ourselves, well, where would density work for us? Like, where do we want density? Not where do we not want density, where do we want it? And when we make that decision, that enables us to make other decisions, like, should we build public water and sewer to that area? Should we start to plan for sidewalks? You know, what do we want our parking requirements to be in that part of town? Can they be different than they are even nearby in an adjacent parcel? How many acres per unit are we comfortable with? And you know, those I think are important ways that municipalities can kind of engage in supporting this effort. And so if a municipality were to do something like that, then perhaps they'd be eligible at the state level for things that they need, like low interest loan money to build out sewer and water infrastructure, or extra points on their state capital improvement plan projects. So, you know, how can we sort of like see what municipalities need at the state level and then use those to bring them farther along on the housing journey. So that's one big piece. There's things like, you know, augmenting TIF districts, like you could use the ability to build multifamily residential to create tax credits at the local level. There's expedited appeals for land use decisions that are appealed once they are finally approved. And the policy behind that is because even where we see dense projects get through the land use boards, you know, they can be appealed, and construction costs are going up about 1% per month from what I hear. And so every delay makes the project more and more expensive. It's more money we need to find to do these projects, and it can jeopardize whether that project will go forward. So those are some of the tweaks that are in that bill that are supposed to each sort of be part of the solution. And I think, you know, you can hear from this panel that this is going to be a problem we solve with 1,000 little solutions. There's not going to be one panacea. We all need to do every little thing that we can to help it. But you know, through creative conversation and being curious, you know, we have seen progress on this over the last 5 or 10 years. And I know from my perspective, when I started getting involved in housing, nobody was talking about it. You know, I was not getting invited to do panels on housing in 2009. But it's been really encouraging that in the past few years, there's been really increased interest, and I see it more and more as a priority legislatively and organizationally. And so that's really encouraging, and this is a great time to get involved, because I think people are really open to new ideas on this and to changing their mind. And I think to talk about density a little bit more, that's a place where I really see people changing their minds. You know, I see some heads nodding in here, but you know, we've always lived densely. That has always been how people have created society, right? I mean, it's what we love about Portsmouth, is that it is dense. We can walk around. You know, there are convenient mixed uses here. There's commercial mixed with residential and office. You know, residential and office create customers for our businesses. They help keep our small and local businesses open and viable. Walkability, you know, it helps our health. It helps our children. It helps our nutrition, you know, and when you create dense places, you run into people you know, and you can say hi to them, and you can chat. And if you are in your car all the time, that's not going to happen. And so zoning is so fundamental to all of those pieces. And as Maggie mentioned, you know, it's a 60-year-old concept. So let's look back before that. You know, let's look back to before the automobile and think about how we were building our housing, and get together and live nearby each other again, you know? I mean, that's all I see this as a question of. And so being involved in your local zoning is really important. You don't have to know everything about zoning to do that. You know, you can say, yeah, I want to live densely. I want to live somewhere I can walk. And, you know, your local land use boards can do with that what they will. But I think, you know, here in Portsmouth, one of the projects that I worked on after being elected on the issue of housing was created a housing committee, which I know we're furthering now under this current city council, which is great. But in that housing committee, we looked around Portsmouth, and the place we felt we could make the biggest impact was in our single-story commercial plazas. So, for example, the plaza where Kmart used to be, or where like FedEx and Planet Fitness are now. And we thought, those are big areas, you know. I mean, actually, the Bolorama Plaza, if you go all the way from the new golf place down to, like, is it Harbor Freight now that's a store? Yeah. That's the same size as Portsmouth's entire downtown. Just that one plaza. And so, isn't that unbelievable, right? That's unbelievable. And so, when you think about the possibility of that, I mean, we have cars and a couple businesses, right? Like, what else could we put there? We could build out to the street. I mean, we could have green space. We could have outdoor restaurants. I mean, there's huge possibilities to that space, right? And so that's what we looked at on the housing committee. We said, how can we zone to support these spaces transitioning towards that future? And so we considered what the right density would be, and actually, we're leaders in the state on this. I mean, those parcels are now zoned to allow up to 36 units per acre with density bonuses. And so you can do 24 by right, and you can do 36 if you add like green space and other attributes. So Portsmouth is doing something. We did something good with that. And so, you know, that requires the engagement of the owners. It requires someone to come do that project. But we made that change in 2017, and it includes like the Frank Jones parcel. That new project is under the zoning that we passed, you know, 5 short years ago. So we can see change. We can do this, you know. And I think it's really important to like remember that all the conversation that goes on. You know, we gotta go to our local boards. We gotta get involved in this governmental process. We gotta, you know, push these ideas through the slow legislative world. But once they come through, you know, there's actions that can be taken that can make a difference. So that's sort of how I've been involved in, and it's exciting to hear all these other stories. I love that. And then it's also neat because I heard this week that there might be a state-level legislative solution to one of the issues that John and Maggie are facing with childcare. And so, so my office is actually working on a project to help make their childcare challenges easier too right now. So the collaboration is great. But I'll leave it at that and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. They've all done quite a bit, and as a newly elected city councilor, I've done very little in comparison. So it's great to be up here with them. It's quite an honor. I'm just going to read something real quick because I think it touches on some of the stuff that we've talked about today. It's a quote. A little closer. Is that better? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's by Margaret Mead. And I think that's what we have in the group here today in the room, is people that are motivated, they're thoughtful, they've done a lot of work already. And as a city councilor, one of the things I've come to realize is, you know, when we have something that's really controversial in front of the city, we get 10 emails. So think about that. You know, if we get 10 emails, it's like, wow, we really need to pay attention. There's more than 10 people in this room. So if something comes before the city council that you have an interest in, please take the time to contact us. You go to the city council website or the City of Portsmouth website, there's a button that says contact all counselors, and it emails out to all 9 of us. So the effect that you can have at the local level here in Portsmouth is huge if you're motivated to do so. So I think that's the most important thing to talk about. The other things I want to talk about is we have a new land use committee headed by Beth Moreau, who was on the planning board for, I think, close to 10 years, but she's a counselor now. Assistant Mayor Joe Kelly's on it, Rich Blaylock's on it, and they're looking and evaluating on the work that Rebecca has done and trying to expand it to that next level. So some of the things that we found is New Hampshire is a Dillon's Rule state. unlike Maine and Massachusetts, which are home rule. So roughly speaking, what that means is we can only do what Concord tells us we're allowed to do. Whereas in Maine and Massachusetts, they can do anything they want as long as they've been told not to. So some of the things that work really well in Kittery, we don't have a chance to do here in Portsmouth. And I hear that a lot when I'm talking to people, like, why can't we mandate this? Or why can't, if somebody builds a 40-unit structure, how come we can't require that they have 5 units be affordable? And we can't require it, but we can offer bonuses. And what's happened is in some cases, the bonuses have worked and we've gotten some units. And in other cases, the bonuses don't work. So we need to tweak those bonuses to make them more desirable for the developers to use. But we don't have the stick. We've only got the carrot here in New Hampshire. And that's just unique to Portsmouth. Not unique to Portsmouth, but unique to New Hampshire versus things that you'll hear that were happening in Massachusetts or Maine. But really the most important thing, I'm going to be 45 this year. I have a daughter who's in high school, and I have a pretty good job, and my wife has a pretty good job. And we rented for 10 years in Portsmouth before we could afford to buy. And we were lucky enough to buy in 2019. Here we are 3 years later. The value of my house has almost doubled. I've already been priced out of a market. So I'm on the city council. I have a good job. I'm nearly 50. I almost can't afford to live here. So what chance does a young firefighter have, a young police officer have, a young teacher have to live in Portsmouth? They really don't have a chance unless they have a family connection. They're independently wealthy, which is great. Or we as a community do something to provide that chance. So that's where we all need to step up and find solutions. One area that I think is of particular significance to Portsmouth is ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, or the cottage houses, or the in-law apartments. There's enabling legislation, which is that key component we need as a Dillon's Rule state from the state of New Hampshire. The ordinances in Portsmouth are still a bit cumbersome to encourage that, so we're working on improving those. And the great thing about ADUs are, even though they may only seem like a drop in a bucket, if you got 5 a year, that's 5 people or 5 families that get to live in Portsmouth that contribute to the community. The other great thing about them is they're often rented by people that already have connections to the community. So it's a friend of a friend or a relative or somebody that knows somebody. So they're that much more in touch with all the things that make Portsmouth great. So not only are we enabling them to live here in their community, we're enabling them to live close to their friends, close to their families. And that's really strengthens our community as a whole when it's all about connections. And speaking a little bit more to Senator Perkins' Quokka's point, when you think about the most desirable places to live in Portsmouth for most people, you think of the South End, you think of Atlantic Heights, you think of the Little Harbor neighborhood or the neighborhoods that are located in the West End. Most of those neighborhoods would be impossible to build today with our zoning regulations. You couldn't build in Atlantic Heights. So when you see a new development come on, I think Green & Company has one now, and it looks like 1970s suburbia with 1.5 acre plots or 1 acre plots. The reason the developers are building communities like that is not because it's necessarily what people want. In this market, people want anything they can get their hands on. That's not the issue. Why they're building them is because that's what our zoning says they have to build. So we need to take a very careful look, and that's what the Land Use Committee is doing at our zoning to encourage the type of buildings and homes that we want. And it's not going to single-handedly, none of these things will single-handedly solve the problem. They're just, they're going to make a small step in the right direction, and we have to think about it with that attitude, that if we can get 1 unit, if we can get 5 units, if we can get 10 units a year, that's better than 0. And over the course of a decade, that's 100 people or 200 people that now have a chance to live in our community and contribute. So it's all about active involvement from citizens so that we have the political will to do these things. And it's about studying and developing the municipal regulations and zoning that are acceptable to the population, but also enhance the development that we want to see that enables teachers, firefighters, police, members of the community to live amongst us. Thank you.
Can we just add one thing real quick to what you just said that's really important and everything else? Just real quickly.
That's what we were going to do anyway.
Okay.
Each of you
Yeah.
can talk to each other at this point.
Okay, perfect.
I think we've all brought up ADUs, and we want to kind of drive home the importance of ADUs and the value of an ADU. Yeah, we deal with a lot of people in senior living. My parents are a great example of living over in Elliott. They live in the same farmhouse I grew up in. They heat the entire farmhouse. There's 2 of them in 2,000 square feet. I'm trying to get them to build a 600 square foot ADU on their property that they move into, 1-story living, and rent the house out. So now you've created a single family house for $125,000 instead of trying to build that single family house for $600,000. So now you've increased the single family housing, not just the ADU population. So it can grow. It's a huge savings, and then you also give those people an income from that primary house to rent. So it's a great solution all the way around. We can't drive home the importance of ADUs.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And one of the things I liked best about ADUs is just that it allows seniors to stay in their homes. And I don't want to guess anybody's age here, but there's probably more of us that are 50 or over than 50 and under. So one of the big challenges you have as you get older is you typically are on a fixed income, and your taxes are always going to rise. No matter what your politicians tell you, they're always going in one direction. We try to slow that down as much as we can, but they're always going to get more expensive. So by adding an ADU, you add a revenue source. But there's also an emotional impact that it has. I was speaking to a neighbor of mine, and she's lived on her own for a number of years now, and she's like, I'd really like to turn my cottage house into an ADU, but the square footage is too big, so I can't figure out how to do it. She said, but the reason I want to do that is I want to live in the cottage house, and I want to have a young family live in my house, because I miss having people around in my house. So I'm in this big empty house that I don't want to leave because this is the neighborhood I've lived my whole life in, but I can't afford to keep it up. I can't afford the taxes, and I want the vibrancy of young people around me. And here's a perfect solution to that if we can just give her the tools that she needs to make it happen.
Yeah, sure.
Could you say what an ADU is?
An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. So, yep. I have a question for Maggie and John. Have you seen other?
One more time, I'm sorry, someone asked.
Oh, accessory dwelling unit. A smaller unit that's built on the property of a existing single-family home. Is that a good way to describe it?
Do you want to talk about the 6 types of ADUs?
Oh, I couldn't do that, but you can.
Just because there seems to be a little confusion, there's 6 types of ADUs roughly, which is mother-in-law apartments, as they were referred to when I was growing up. So above the garage, in the basement, separate like a cottage house, attached on like as an annex, and there's at least one more, but I can't recall. But basically it's taking your house and building a separate apartment with its own kitchen and bathroom and entryway on the land that your house is on in some sort of fashion. Attics, I think attics was the final one.
I think we all get so used to using acronyms, so thank you for that question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, in a minute. I want to make sure they don't have any questions for each other, and then I'm going to hand it out to you all.
I'm just curious if you've seen other businesses be successful in building housing for their employees. I know you guys are in a unique position where you can do it more affordably, but I'm just curious if you've seen that be successful with anybody else.
Well, the interesting thing that we're starting to encounter is we're the landlord for these individuals as well as the employer. And so that's a natural challenge, because what if they're a great employee and a horrible tenant? So we have to talk to them in 2 different things. If they're late to work, it's an employee issue. If they don't take care of their dog, it's a landlord issue. And most businesses don't want to get in that world. I know there's companies all over the area that we've talked to that want to do something in the housing part, but they don't want to go from, Lonza doesn't want to build housing and manage housing, as an example, restaurant owners, and stuff like that. I have heard a lot of places that are buying 8-10 unit places to offer to their employees, but the number isn't anywhere near where we need to be. And I mentioned earlier about retaining our 18 to 25-year-olds. We need to attract 18 to 25-year-olds to the state, and we need affordable housing to do that also. That's the only piece that we're really missing in New Hampshire is that childcare and that housing piece.
No, and I just wanted to add to that. I think we tend to hear the stories when businesses do this, and I know Water Country considered it. I know Gaslight has considered it, but I haven't heard of anyone else being successful in doing this besides John and Maggie. And I couldn't echo what you're saying enough about the affordable housing piece. I mean, young people would love to live in a place like this. I mean, and we are lucky for that because now everyone can work remotely and they can bring their big city incomes to our little place and build a life here, you know. And I think that includes people like me who, I mean, I moved back here from DC. I went to law school, I was in New York, I was in DC, and then I wanted to come home because it's great here. But part of why I wanted to come home is because it's walkable. You know, there's farmers markets. I can eat food from the 47 farms I have in my district alone, you know. And I think, if anything, the pandemic really reinforced just the huge value of that community. I mean, our local economy is very strong. So all we need is a place for them to be. Literally, like we just need to get them a home so they can come here and be here. So I think that when I'm up in Concord, you know, being able to advocate for the fact that, you know, our family has chosen 3 times in a row to live, and this is my wife and my kids in the back here, we've chosen to live 3 times in a row in homes that are either in a multifamily structure or attached to another unit because we love it. I mean, we're in our 30s and we can say, hey, we're gonna be gone for the week. Could you grab our milk when it comes and put it in the fridge? Like, could you just check on stuff? Or, you know, someone else can say, I'm gonna be away, could you let my dog out? And we're right there, we're right next to them, you know? So I think being able to say, this is a way that some people actually do like to live, you know, is a counter narrative to, I'll just friendlily say some of my older legislators, but like to folks who grew up differently than maybe what I'm describing, you know, and need someone there to tell that story and tell what the value of that is. But I also think nationally, and New Hampshire's no exception, we're seeing this convergence on like small condo units, or maybe they're accessory dwelling units, maybe they're in a multifamily structure like an apartment building, that also my mom wants to live in. You know, she's 70, she wants a bedroom on the same floor as her kitchen, and it's small, she doesn't have to take care of the yard. That's the same unit that a 28-year-old wants to live in, you know, when they're not married yet and they just want to get started. So I think those are the units that are in the highest demand, are those kind of smaller, no maintenance units. And we have no zoning for those, you know? We have zoning for the home you have for those 10 or 15 years when your kids are growing up and you need bikes and, you know, like baseball gloves and all that kind of stuff. But that's, when you really think about it, it's a short part of your life, a fun part, you know? So we need to support people through their whole life journey through our zoning.
We had a lot of questions when we went through Dover about, well, what is this going to do to my home value? You know, you're putting all these units in, is it going to affect my prices? And we want to say, like, well, there's a lot of documentation, so many studies out there that counter that idea, that it actually makes it a more richer environment, and so the value of homes don't drop. But, you know, we talk about supporting housing through the spectrum. You know, what we've talked about a lot is, okay, if someone isn't there, you know, coming up in a smaller unit, who's going to buy your house when you're ready to sell it? So if you need to downsize out of your single family house, like my parents are looking to do at this point, you know, we're looking again, it's a transition across the whole way.
Okay, so now we'd like to open it up to all of you, and Connie had her hand up first, so I'll start with her.
Thank you. My name is Connie Framuth, and over the years, I have built on many Habitat for Humanity builds. And one in particular I'm thinking of that would fit in with your cottage plan is we built 10 houses in 9 days on one street. And we had like 200 volunteers that was that coming and going. And I'm just wondering if any of you work with Habitat for Humanity on any of your projects.
Does anybody have a?
So we have spoken quite a bit with Habitat of York County about partnering on some of our projects. We haven't yet done that, but I know that they're also, at least for that particular habitat, working with the same constraints that the rest of us are in terms of identifying property, in terms of getting something that is affordable that they can build on. And for them, they have, their model is really to build single-family homes for folks that are going to move in and own them. And so they're starting to, not to speak for them, but in my conversations with them, it sounds like they're starting to think more about how can we have a larger impact and maybe look at doing rentals or doing multi-units or doing a single-family home and an ADU. So that may not answer your question directly, but I certainly have spoken with them at length about possible projects we can do. I think we need solutions that are, we need all kinds of solutions, and they're a good piece of that.
Okay. Thank you. So I want to reiterate GenCourt, Gencourt. You can Google them, and there's a wealth of information, including who to contact and how to contact them.
I'll just add one more thing. That's the name, the short name for the general court, which is what the legislature is called. And there are bills on there too, and you can put a bill number in and track that bill. You can read that bill, you can find out what's going on. And whoever explained that we were a Dillon state, believe it was you, Counselor? Yeah. That's brilliant to know, because people don't know that we don't work like Massachusetts or Maine. We work in a very different way, and it is very top down. So you need to ask us to help you, to help us help you.
Thank you. Okay, Peter, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm State Representative Peter Somsich. I represent Ward 3 here in Portsmouth. And I want to just, I want to underscore something that Andrew just said, because it's really important. First of all, ADUs, one of the important part of that is that the landlord lives on the property. It's not a remote landlord. It's not a big tenant house that somebody owns and is managed by a super or something. It's the landlord lives there. Okay, that's really important for a community. Secondly, we are, as mentioned, New Hampshire has only the power to do locally what the legislature enables them to do, which means nothing almost. We cannot do almost anything, okay? And a lot of the things that we hear from Massachusetts, Maine, and other states have to do with the fact that they are empowered to do a lot of things locally. For example, maybe a surcharge on meals and hotel taxes to be used for some purpose like affordable housing. But here in New Hampshire, I think the Business Industry Association is playing it really coy about their responsibilities. First of all, everyone talks about we need to bring people in, we need more employers, we need to grow. You know, we as a state don't benefit from those people at all because Portsmouth doesn't get anything in the way of profits from its businesses, and the state gets some business profits tax, some enterprise taxes, often only from, the last time I heard, 90% of all businesses in New Hampshire don't pay any taxes at all. So where are we going to get the funding to do the things the state has to do? There are a couple ways of addressing this issue of affordable housing, and to be honest, I only knew 3 ways of how to control affordable housing or rents, for example. One of them is rent control, okay, which is practiced in New York City. My 2 uncles of mine lived in east side of New York City for 50 years because of rent control. The other thing would be like the Housing Authority building public housing for mainly low-income people. And then there's other ways that the federal or the state government can do more in the way of funding projects or incentivizing it. And Germany, for example, gives a housing allowance to everybody who's paying more than 30% of the rent. Everybody. So we should have vouchers for everybody. And then it would be a level playing field no matter where you live. Now, given the situation we have here in New Hampshire, what can we do? Well, one way I suggest might be to consider a serious expansion of public transportation, commuter rail, and bus lines, especially in the seacoast. If we can connect Dover, Rochester, Portsmouth, the seacoast with an efficient transportation system, and we have coast already to build on, but if we can get from one place to another real easily, conveniently, at all times of the day, whether it's going downtown Portsmouth or going to work, that would be a massive investment that pays back in a big way, because now people can live in places where they can afford to live and work where they have a job. It's going to be very hard for employers, and they should be responsible for providing workforce housing for their workforce. However, it's a massive problem, and it needs the help of all entities, state and federal. And you know, I saw on the flyer it says Governor Sununu has this $100 million housing loans. That's over 10 years. That's $10 million a year in the whole state of New Hampshire. That is nothing. Maybe you can build 10 houses in the whole state. And where would you build them? Would you think that you would take that 10 million and build houses in downtown Portsmouth? I don't think so. You probably build it somewhere it's more affordable to build. So that has to be considered too, where we can build them, and if we have public transportation to connect people, it might be a much more easier sell for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And on the transportation note, I would like to say that for some people, taking a bus more than once a month to gather to get help with food is $3 too much that they don't have. $1.50 each way. Okay. Next. I'll go to the back.
Thank you. And I'd like to pick up on Peter's point about the transportation. I mean, as a transportation planner, I approach affordable housing as joined at the hip to transportation, and that the the average cost for a household is 50% for housing plus transportation. And I think that has to be part of the equation unless you have the excellent example that we had from Durham of people able to live where they work. But assuming that there may be a member of the household that works someplace else, they're still going to have to get there. And if that requires buying a first or a second car, then way up goes the cost of the affordable housing plus transportation, 50% at an average nationally. Bringing it to Portsmouth, I love the idea of developing the Kmart Plaza and the Planet Fitness Plaza. I mean, that seems like that's where you get the more square feet per dollar than fighting over the scarce space with $1 million condos in downtown Portsmouth. But yet at the same time, we're eliminating the Middle Street bike lane that would allow people to get safely and quickly from that corridor. And it's not just that plaza, but there are many others going south down Lafayette Road where you could have wonderful affordable housing, but still require cars to do that because the coast service is really very limited. I agree with Peter that that's a wonderful foundation to build on, but it should be combined with biking. And I think that maybe for Andrew, the way that I look at the Middle Street bike lane is it didn't go all the way in. It stopped short. It was done somewhat quickly. It didn't have a safe surface, and it should have been part of the overall bike plan for the city. So in looking at that bike plan, think of it in terms of joined at the hip to affordable housing.
You on that, Kevin?
I'll comment. I mean, I don't know if everybody in the room knows, but I was particularly a proponent of the bike lane because my daughter was a freshman this year, and my house is right behind Middle Street Market, so it would have been kind of ideal for her to take it to the school. So I was in favor of that. But we are going to, transportation costs are huge, and one of it's difficult in the wintertime, but in the summertime, I mean, we see it with the scooters parked on the sidewalks downtown, and you're going to see it now more with the electric bikes. Different modes of transportation for people that live locally and work locally. I work out of my house, except for when I'm traveling. When I travel, I take C&J. So I have a car, but my car is actually older than my teenage daughter, and if it breaks, I probably won't replace it because I can take an Uber to C&J, or my wife can drop me off. And then I walk down, like I walked here today. So I try not to use the car as much as possible. And I don't think there's a huge percentage of the population that's doing that, but I think it's a significant percentage that is trying to be more or less reliant on cars today than there was in any time in the last probably 100 years. So I agree that transportation is a very big component of it. I will add two things. We do have a legislative subcommittee on the city council, which I'm not a part of. But they look at all the bills going through Concord, and then we kind of single out ones that are of particular significance to Portsmouth, and then we advocate for them. And the other thing is our parking director, Ben Fletcher, is on the board of Coast, and we're going to appoint a counselor to be a liaison for Coast as well, because we think that's a very important aspect of the community. And if you do go onto their network, it's a pretty good network. It is live, so you can actually see where the buses are in real time on your smartphone. The problem is it's a little bit chicken before the egg. The ridership is not that high, so how do you increase frequency? But the ridership's not that high because the frequency's not that high. So you know, if we did something we called the Coast Bus Challenge, and I do that now for $1.50, I take the bus from my house to downtown when it's raining really hard instead of driving. And if we could all just make one extra Coast Bus ride a month, that would make an impact.
I second that challenge. That goes to all of us. If you don't use the bus, you don't know what the issues are with the bus. You can get 15 tickets for $20 online. It'll come to your house within a week through the mail, and give it a try and see what the issues are. I see.
Hey, Robin, can we add one thing to what you just said, and then we'll
Okay.
pass back? What I'm going to say is probably controversial, and I'm sorry if it is ahead of time. But public transportation, what you said, Peter, and what you're saying, you guys got to remember the message you're sending. Come serve us, come work in our schools, come work in our homes, come clean our yards, and then go back there. That's the wrong message. That these people shouldn't be able to, they should be able to live in our communities if they teach our kids, if they take care of our seniors. I understand public transportation, don't get me wrong, but the message that we're sending to them is come serve us and then go home. And that's the wrong message that we don't want to send our 18 to 25-year-olds.
As an old person, I will say that I need the bus sometimes too. And I live a 15-minute walk away from here. So public transportation is more than just going far away and coming back in. It can be local.
Hi, my name is Paul O'Connor. First of all, thank you all for being here. This is really an important conversation. I had a couple points I need to make. First of all, you know, your story, the innovation and the persistence to create workforce housing when it's not available in the normal the normal way of doing business. You know, you can't hire a contractor to create workforce housing. That's, you know, what you have done is incredible, but it's also so frustrating that that's what it takes. The government needs to play a major role in workforce housing. And for that matter, workforce housing is one of the many tragic examples of the failure of trickle-down economics. 40 years of trickle-down economics has gotten us where we are today. That has to change. Another point, you also talked about keeping our young adults here in the state or bringing them back to the state. New Hampshire's minimum wage is the lowest in New England. In fact, no other state in the country has a lower minimum wage than New Hampshire. That has to change. We have to know why we vote for the people we vote for and what they stand for. You know, there are so many arms to this problem. We just need to focus and work together. There are so many elements to the arms of social justice and to the body of social justice. We all need to work together, you know, to create that large group that can actually have an impact politically. And this is a political issue. Thank you.
I want to thank our panel and everybody who's here, because this is, as I view it, not just a regulatory issue, but a cultural expectation issue that all of us here are the people who help change that cultural expectation. In planning to come to this, I called a neighbor of mine who came here from Germany. She's about 10 years older than I am. And so we were talking about the housing issues, and she said after World War II, Germany, West Germany, established a program where home builders could get a government loan, a government subsidized loan of some sort, and she didn't remember the details because she was still young, to build a home if they had what we would call an ADU, a mother-in-law's apartment, an extra apartment that somebody who was displaced could live in. And we're hearing that now. We're hearing about all those people who are displaced from the Ukraine. And after the wall came down and the people who moved from East Germany into West Germany, we had a grandmother living downstairs from us in one of those apartments. Those apartments are now part of the cultural expectation that everybody who builds a home has either an apartment upstairs that all those strong young legs can run up to while they can't afford to have a separate home of their own, or Granny lives downstairs, or the fire department squealed out of our back driveway as they raced off to the fire that was down the street because they lived in one of those apartments. So those are the kinds of expectations that we change. When we say, not in my backyard, I don't want to have Granny living downstairs, we're contributing to that. We need to be the people who say, yeah, we want to have Granny downstairs, or we want to have that extra apartment, or can I change that old carriage house into an apartment? So thank you, and all of us need to be helping on that.
I'm afraid I'm going to interject some
political things. I hope I don't make anyone angry, but it's sort of, look at the gray hair. So I've been around for a while. And one of the things that New Hampshire failed to do was to actually build mass transportation. There was legislation and monies from the federal government for them to be able to begin work from Concord to Nashua and to Manchester. That's exactly where they were starting to, again, process, well, actually proper transportation where you don't have all the smog and all the cars on the highway and people can actually get to their work faster and back home faster. They failed to put forth and complete the legislative need so that the government would be able to pay them that money to start that first initial part of public transportation all the way from Concord to Manchester to Nashua. That was going to be their first leg. So I've been in New Hampshire for a number of years, and my family's been here for a number of generations. And you're right about people leaving. And I encourage my family to leave because of pay and because of affordability. So that's just another sort of subline. I'm glad that a lot of people are here and that there's a larger piece of a puzzle, but you're trying to solve one of the pieces of the puzzle. So thank you very much, and a fantastic idea, and thank you all for being here. And you might want to change who you vote for.
Sorry about that. Tom Emerson, I'm from Kittery. Emily and I serve on the Housing Committee in Kittery, and Rebecca and I have been doing workforce housing for at least a decade. I look a lot older, she doesn't. Lucky you. Just a couple of things. When we talk about public transportation, Kittery is the largest employment center in the Seacoast region. We have 14,000 jobs in Kittery, more than 14. We only have 10,000 people. We have 8,000 jobs at the shipyard. Coast doesn't go back and forth. It's not part of the regular thing. I think from a regulatory standpoint, I think there's some issues. It would be great if the town of Portsmouth, the city of Portsmouth, the town of Kittery, and the two states could get together to make that possible. The other thing is ADUs. I've been an advocate for years. If you don't have an ADU and you're going to advocate for ADUs, you need to have an ADU. I have one. It pays most of my mortgage. It used to be an in-law apartment. It's tough to get up in public, you know, which I do. I helped write the ADU model code for Maine. And when you get up in front of a community and you advocate for them, and they say, would you like someone living in your house? And I say, well, yeah, I have someone. She was talking about Germany. Here in the Seacoast region, during World War II, the government gave out money for people to share their homes with people who worked at the shipyard. You were a patriot if you did that. Today, if you have two people that aren't part of your family living in your house, you're a scofflaw. So things have to change. I appreciate the notion of owner-occupied ADUs. That's too limiting. We need to move past that. They do it elsewhere. It needs to happen. And then lastly, because Ivy Van might see this and would give me a hard time, she's a state rep from Peterborough. HUD, Freddie, Fannie, all the housing, the finance authorities that allow, and finance is a huge piece of this workforce and everything else. There's no such thing as affordable housing in this country without subsidy. It just doesn't happen. You can't just go to your contractor and build it unless you do an ADU or unless you're building your own thing. HUD thinks your house is 4 units and some percentage of commercial. So we need to start thinking about what we have, these single-family neighborhoods that take up 70% of the available land in every community that I know of. We need to move to the point where it's not just an accessory dwelling unit, it's up to 4 units of people in a house-sized situation. I'm not talking about small apartment buildings. You go in all over Portsmouth and Forsyth and Kittery, there's 4 units in a house. It happens, we live that way now, but again, it's not legal where we are. So that was House Bill, I think 1177. It got tabled in the next legislature. It'd be great to see that move forward.
Okay, we're going to have one more question from one of my committee members.
Thanks. I'm Janet Pulaski, and I'm married to Bill Lyons, who did not identify himself, the transportation planner. But my last question is to go back to to our wonderful panel, and thank you so much for coming. And it's addressed. I think we all knew there was a crisis. I think we're all now much better informed, and that's all of us who are here and the many more people who are listening on live stream. What I would ask each of you is, we know more now. What would you see us doing? What can we do to advocate for more workforce and affordable housing? We all have postcards here. If you have an address that you would suggest or someone you'd suggest we write to, but what else can we do?
I'll let the people that are much smarter than I and much more connected tell you who to contact. But one thing that I would say was that when projects come before planning boards and zoning boards and such, you know, the people that come out are the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard. Come out and be a force for good, for the change. Come out and support. You know, there's so much negativity with a lot of these projects, and that's the squeaky wheel that's heard. So if you can come out and, you know, we had people that supported our Dover project, and they supported it in that they didn't come out and protest, which I appreciated, I really did. But coming out and just giving and saying, you know what, yes, we want this, we feel this is important for our community would be great.
Just adding to that, there's a lot of pressure on our boards because they hear 4 or 5, 10 negative people. If they heard 4 or 5 positive people, it goes a long ways, and I'm sure you can say more about it, but when they start to hear a positive feedback that this is what you want in your community, it takes a tremendous amount of pressure off from the boards that are trying to appease a lot of different people.
I would second that, absolutely, and just add that there's so much misinformation out there, and so I applaud you all for coming to learn more. I would encourage you to share what you've learned with others and to encourage others who may have questions or you may hear something that's not correct to either try to correct them or send them in the direction of some information that is right or to one of us. I think we have a lot of work to do around dispelling myths and just really clarifying what affordable housing is, what it looks like, who lives in affordable housing, and so forth.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate one more time. If you go to the City of Portsmouth website, there's a contact all city councilors, and maybe your task today is to go home, find that link, click on it, and just say what your name is and your address. And you don't have to live in Portsmouth. It can come from anybody. And just say that I support affordable housing. And then there's a little button you can click that'll be included in the packet the next time that comes out. I can't stress this enough. There's very, very few people that are actively engaged in our city government. So if 5 people come out to speak, that's a huge number.
Okay, so once again, thank you all for serving on this panel today. I'd like to thank my committee for doing so much research for the handout. I'd like to thank our AV people, Jen, for helping us do this today. And also, I'd like to note that the video of this is going to be on the South Church website. And if you want to share it with your friends to have this conversation and continue this conversation, please do so. And go in peace and stay engaged and know that each one of you plays a part in this. Thank you. Go have lunch. Do you
have someone, we have someone on our staff that handles that, and so we separated the two, and it's important because you have to see them two different ways.
Right, exactly. It's really complicated, isn't it, huh?
Yeah, it is. And we got some great employees that are bad tenants and some bad tenants that are great employees, and it's just, you got to kind of, make sure they understand both sides of it too. So.
Practical question, how do you heat the units?
These are actually, we super insulated them, so we did an oil retained electrical heat, and they cost about $60 a unit to heat. And so we're hoping to go solar and get completely off from that.
I was intrigued looking at it. Like, heat pumps or
Yeah, they're you heat them up and then they stay warm, and they're, to be honest with you, once you get them to 65 or 70, they stay there. It's amazing.
I'm curious about that.
Thank you for having us today.
Oh, they're very good.
Made a 9%
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that would have contributed to the problem, not the solution. So if you look longer term, it works out really well.
I have a question, I don't know who to ask it. We live in a homeowners association, and there's been a fuss.
Thank you very much. You were very creative with what you were doing, and it's lovely. I could see where people would actually be joyful about, at least content to be in that environment. Considering that I'm one of these people, looking for some housing.
We want them to be proud of where they live.
Yeah.
We want them to, that's important too. The dignity of where they live, they should be proud of.
Well, I sold a condo in Exeter, and I can't afford any replacement. I have to downsize, no, really I'm looking for an apartment because I can't afford it.
We hear that story unbelievably frequently.
It is frequent, too frequent. But anyway, you do something thinking things are going to happen financially, and then all of a sudden, they're not. Several years ago, your plans are lovely.
I did want to say that we totally, we're very supportive of public transport as well.
Yes.
In addition, our plan is to divide the country for example, for any employees that live there. I just think there's so many different options, so I do think it would be great if we could incentivize state level transportation expansion and water and sewer expansion.
Oh, absolutely, and at this point in time, I think it needs a legislative change in body to probably do that. And I'm going to keep plugging.
Thank you so much.
Jen, we wanted
But they do have that one route now.
Yeah, because my sister uses it. My sister lives in Warsaw now. So I was too. She works in the hospital, and she was doing this. Yeah, so it goes. Yeah, and actually, we were. I remember. Part of the reason we were talking about this is because back when we were enforcing the regular high-tech project in the water district site, we wanted to see if this would stop. So now it goes the youngest in the Portsmouth. Yeah, it's small. Based on whatever the space that right near the
Oh, wow.
I'm just going to say hi to Tom here. Fair tag.
I'm going to go walk up back to the bridge.
Okay, perfect.
Anyway, good to see you, Tom.
Yeah, hopefully we won't have to do that. That's a long uphill battle.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for speaking today. I'm just quite interested about Germany. I work for a German company.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I'm over in just north of Frankfurt. Pre-COVID, quite a bit.
I lived in Germany. I worked for a teacher on the base system. So I lived in Stuttgart for 15, or just north of Stuttgart for 15 years, and then just south of Heidelberg for 8 years. And my daughter went to German school. And we moved when she was going to have to go to high school because then she would have had to get on a public bus to get to the high school because it's like, no, we don't have school buses.
Right.
We'll
Different mentality.
We'll subsidize insurance so that she can walk to elementary school. And when she gets to high school, she usually takes the public train and public bus.
Yep.
Or rides a bike, and there's a good bike lane.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought, one of the things they do with their public transit is when she went to college here, but she did her year abroad in Germany. Yeah, because she's native bilingual. And she said, Mom, all I have to do is flash my student ID card and I get on any public transportation. Flash my student ID card. That's pretty nice. Yeah. And that, that means there's going to be lots of ridership because all those students are getting on.
Well, you need ridership because if you have ridership, then you have support.
Right.
To keep it going.
Right. I don't like to get on the public transit these days because it's not, there are not enough people on there. As a single female, you know, I want to make sure there's somebody